Hello and welcome to Children's Church. We have an interesting lesson today. Let's start with our memory verse. The Lord says, I will rescue those who love me. I will protect those who trust in my name. Psalm 91:14. Let's go through that one more time. The Lord says, I will rescue those who love me. I will protect those who trust in my name. Psalm 91:14. Now, we've been talking about Paul and all his travels. One thing that I haven't mentioned is that Paul had a very dear friend named Luke. Luke was a doctor, a physician, and he traveled a lot with Paul. He also wrote the Gospel of Luke, and he wrote the book of Acts that we've been going through. So he has told or chronicled, that's a cool word, he has told all the things that have happened to the very, very first church right after Jesus went to heaven. And so we have been following his account of all these things that have happened to Paul and to others. And Paul is being sent to Rome as a prisoner. And so he and Luke and some of their friends, plus, I'll show you the picture here. This is Luke and Paul, and then there was a centurion named Julius. A centurion was a man in the Roman army who was in charge of 100 people. That's like our word century means 100. A centurion was in charge of 100 men. So they set sail. They were down at Caesarea, and then they sailed, and the second day they got all the way to Sidon. And while they were there, Julius let them go ashore and visit with some of their friends, and their friends supplied the things that Paul and Luke and others were going to need on their journey. And remember that Paul is being sent to Rome because he believed that Jesus was the Son of God, and he died and was resurrected and went to heaven. And they didn't believe that, so that's why they're sending him to Rome as a prisoner. Because they sailed in September, that was not a good time to sail. The winds were from the wrong direction. These are all sailing ships with the big canvases where the wind is what carried them along. Well, the winds were blowing from the west, and so they're trying to go west, and that's not working. So instead of being able to just sail west, they had to kind of go up the coast, and they stayed on the east side of the island of Cyprus because that kind of blocked the winds. And they finally got all the way over to Lycia, clear over here. And when they got there, there was an Egyptian ship that had come up from Alexandria, and they were getting ready to sail to Italy. Italy's clear over here. And so even though it was the wrong time of year and the winds were against them, they decided that the centurion Julius and the owner of the boat and the pilot of the boat, for them it meant money. They had a cargo. They needed to deliver the cargo to get their money. So for them, it was not an issue of whether it was bad winds or good winds. They wanted to go. And Julius wanted to deliver Paul to Rome the way that's what he was sent for. And so even though Paul said, this is a dangerous journey, there's going to be all kinds of trouble, we're going to lose the ship, he was telling them all these things of warning, and they didn't pay any attention. So they set sail from Lycia, and they went down past the island of Crete, because Crete was another way of blocking the westerly winds. And they sailed around to a place called Fair Havens, which is on the south side of Crete, and they stayed there for a while. And one day the sky cleared and there was a gentle southerly wind, and so the ship's owner and the pilot and Julia said, "Hey, this is great weather, let's go." They started on their journey again, and all of a sudden hurricane force winds came rushing down across the island of Crete, and it was blowing them everywhere. They couldn't control the ship. They just let the rudder is how they steer the ship. They just let that go, and wherever the wind moved it, that's where the ship went. And for days, they didn't see the sun. They couldn't see the stars at night. They even put ropes down under the ship and tied them over the top to try to hold the ship together. Our ships today are huge, but the ships back then were made out of wood, and they were big to them, but they were very small to us. So they are just bouncing around all over and just being tossed and turned every which way. And Paul said, "I told you this is going to happen." It had been days since they'd had anything to eat. They were staying wet all the time. They never got dried out because they were just constantly being drenched by the rain and by the winds and the huge waves that would wash over the ship over and over and over again. And finally, on the 14th day, they hadn't had anything to eat this whole time. This is 2 weeks. They've gone without food because they've been battling this terrible storm. And Paul stood up and he said, "Last night, an angel of the God I serve came to me, and he told me that he has given the ship into my hands, and God wanted Paul to stand before the emperor in Rome. And so he's going to get Paul there no matter what." And he graciously gave the lives of all 276 men on board into Paul's keeping. Paul said, "We're going to have something to eat. We're going to take care of the ship the best way we can." And he said, God's going to get us through this. He did tell them that the ship and all its contents would be lost. They threw overboard all the cargo to make the ship lighter. They threw the tackle over. They threw everything over that they could get rid of on the ship to make it lighter so it would stay on top of the waves instead of going so far down. And about midnight on the 14th day, after Paul had told them this, he took bread, he broke it in front of all of them, he ate, and he encouraged all of them to eat. So they ate finally after 2 weeks, and when they were all full, then they set the watch, and the sailors, because that was their livelihood, that's what they did all the time, the sailors around midnight started thinking, "I think the water's getting more shallow. We're getting closer to land." It was so black they couldn't see anything except, lightning bolts in the sky. So they threw over whatever was left that they could get their hands on, and they waited for dawn. They were just praying that dawn would come before they ran into something, because they have no idea where they are. They've just been tossed by the waves for 2 weeks. They don't have any idea where they're headed. And they finally, when dawn lit the next day, as I said, they were taking soundings. That means they were measuring the depth of the water, and they knew they were getting shallower and shallower. They were coming to some shore, and when the sun was coming up, they could finally see that there was a sandy beach. Instead of just a rocky shore where they'd be smashed against the rocks, there was a sandy area, And they were so thrilled. They were excited and cheering and so glad for that to happen. And Paul had warned them that the ship would be lost. Well, the ship struck a sandbar before it could get out up to the shore. It got stuck, and the front of the ship, which is called the bow, was stuck on the sandbar, but the back of the ship just got beaten to death by the waves. It just splintered, just shattered. And the Roman soldiers were going to kill all the prisoners. I've told you before, they are in charge of the prisoners. If the prisoners escape, they pay for it with their lives. So they're not going to take any chance of losing any of these prisoners. But Julius, the centurion, didn't want anything to happen to Paul. And so he said, nope, we're not going to do that. And he told everybody on board, if you can swim, swim. If you can't swim, grab a piece of board, part of the ship that's breaking loose, just grab something and float over to the shore. So they finally floated over to the shore of the island where they were. They had no idea where they were, but they were praising God that he had honored his word to Paul. Every single man got safely onto shore. No one was hurt. God had said not a single hair of their head would be harmed. And that's exactly what happened. He got every single man on the shore safely, and they were thrilled to be on shore again. Oops. So I have a little project, and you can do this like I did with scraps of paper, or you could just draw a picture. I have the ship back here. You can see how the sail's kind of torn up, and the back of the ship is just splintered. It's just falling apart. And here's a man who's floating with a piece of wood, and these men are sitting on the shore, and these are just laying on the shore. This is Paul, because he's giving praise to God. He was thanking God for delivering all of them safely. And you can make up your own picture however you want it to look. They lost the ship, but they were all saved. And a fun little snack is to take a little slice of apple. Now, I didn't put cheese on here because cheese gets hot and it gets kind of bendable. But you could put a piece of cheese on a toothpick, like that one, and stick it down in there, and you have your own edible boat. So just a little fun snack if you want to try something. That's our lesson for today. We need to go over our memory verse one more time. Okay. The Lord says, I will rescue those who love me. Did he rescue Paul? Absolutely. Will he rescue us? Yes, he will. The Lord says, I will rescue those who love me. I will protect those who trust in my name. Psalm 91:14. He protected Paul, and he even protected all the other men on the ship, even though most of them didn't know him at all. But God is faithful, and he'll protect you too. See you next time.